Okay, picture this if you can. A leader, um, just totally in charge for decades, iron fist kind of rule.
Right.
And all the while, he's supposedly building up this secret fortune,
Yeah.
just almost unbelievably huge.
Yeah.
We're diving into Muammar Gaddafi's hidden financial world today. This guy who called himself the King of Kings of Africa.
And, these weren't just whispers for 40 years. There were always rumors.
Exactly.
So in this deep dive, we're looking at the reports, the actual financial dealings, the incredible sums involved.
And what happened after he fell, right? Because that's when some of this stuff started to come out.
Precisely. The chaos afterward sort of peeled back the layers a bit. So our mission really is to try and understand how he pulled this off.
How do you hide that much wealth?
And what does it all mean, this kind of secret financial empire?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. It really all comes back to oil, doesn't it? Libya had tons of it.
Oh, absolutely. He seized power in '69 just as Libya was hitting the big time with oil.
Perfect timing for him.
You could say that. And he moved fast, nationalized the industry, so all that oil money flowed straight to the state.
But under him, the state and him were kind of the same thing, weren't they?
That's the crux of it. The lines blurred completely. That oil wealth became the bedrock of his power, his personal control, and, well, his personal fortune.
And it wasn't just about getting rich himself, was it? I mean, the whole King of Kings thing.
Yeah.
That sounds expensive.
It certainly was. He poured money into projecting influence, especially across Africa, funding revolutionary groups, bankrolling his sort of Pan-African dream.
So using Libya's money for his own political projects.
Exactly. And back home, building this massive cult of personality, that takes cash too, lots of it.
Right, so the oil money's flowing in. How does he actually, siphon it off, keep it hidden? Where did it go?
Okay. This is where it gets really intricate. Sources point to, well, a few key things. First, a whole network of secret bank accounts.
Secret how? Like numbered Swiss accounts.
Sort of, yeah. Spread across Europe, the Middle East, billions, literally billions, funneled into these accounts, deliberately kept away from, the usual financial watchdogs.
Just hiding in plain sight, almost. But why keep it secret? Was it just a giant rainy day fund for him?
Partly, maybe. Personal wealth, sure. But these accounts were also workhorses, financing political allies, buying weapons, and crucially, bribing foreign officials, governments. It was like a massive off-the-books slush fund for his global plays.
And nobody knew about these accounts. I mean, how did this eventually surface?
Well, the dam really broke after 2011. When his regime collapsed, investigators started digging.
Right, the fall of Tripoli.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And suddenly the sheer scale started to become clear. And this entity, the Libyan Investment Authority, the LIA, was right in the middle of it.
The LIA, that's the sovereign wealth that everyone talks about, isn't it? It was huge.
Oh, massive. Officially, it was managing Libya's oil surplus. Assets reported around, $67 billion, something like that? Huge investments globally. Big banks like Societe Generale, Barclays, Deutsche Bank are mentioned. But the key thing, the LIA also had these really murky connections to Gaddafi's personal stash.
So state fund and his private piggy bank were kind of mixed up.
Very mixed up. And they used incredibly complex financial structures, layers upon layers, to hide where the money really came from and who actually owned it.
So we're definitely not talking about simple offshore accounts.
Yeah.
This was high-level financial engineering.
Absolutely. Global scale. And it wasn't just bank accounts either. Gaddafi built up a pretty staggering portfolio of real estate. Lavish stuff.
Like what? Palaces.
Think mansions on the French Riviera, big properties in London, apparently even a compound in New York City.
The compound in New York, how do you keep that quiet?
Well, maybe the ownership wasn't totally secret, but the value and the source of the funds definitely were obscured. Reports talk about hundreds of millions spent just on personal properties abroad.
Hundreds of millions.
Yeah. Plus investments in things like hotels, land, commercial buildings across Europe.
And how did he hide those? Same tricks.
Pretty much. Shell companies, offshore accounts, the usual playbook for laundering money and making assets really hard to trace back to the actual owner. These shell companies, they exist on paper in places with loose rules, specifically to hide who's behind the money.
Okay, so hidden bank accounts, luxury properties, and then there's the gold. That always sounded almost mythical. The golden vaults.
Ah, yes, the gold. That adds a whole other layer, doesn't it? He supposedly had around 143 tons of gold.
143 tons.
Yeah, that's billions of dollars worth, and a lot of it was apparently stored in secret vaults.
Actual physical gold bars? Why? Was he expecting the apocalypse or something?
Maybe. But more practically, it was probably insurance. Insurance against international sanctions, which Libya faced, repeatedly.
Right, like after Lockerbie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was also a hedge. If the Libyan dinar collapsed, gold holds its value. It's a classic move for regimes worried about stability. And interestingly, sources mention gold and other valuables being moved out of Libya just before the NATO intervention in 2011.
So he saw the writing on the wall.
It certainly looks like he was trying to secure assets before things went south. Moving 143 tons of gold. I mean, just think about the logistics. It really underlines the scale we're talking about.
Yeah, you don't just pop that in a suitcase. Which kind of loops back to the LIA, the Sovereign Wealth Fund. It was supposed to be managing oil money for Libya, but it sounds like it was just another tool for him.
The lines were definitely, let's say, flexible. The LIA's investments were everywhere, global markets, real estate, resources. That complexity made tracing things even harder.
And then Western governments froze its assets when he fell.
That's right. A huge chunk got frozen, essentially blocked, so Gaddafi's family or loyalists couldn't access it. The idea was maybe eventually return it to Libya.
But freezing it is one thing. Figuring out who really owned what within the LIA, that's another story.
Exactly. It shows how these huge state funds can be, well, double-edged swords under autocratic rule. On paper, they look good, diversifying assets, but they can also be used to hide and move wealth illicitly.
Right. And we mentioned this wasn't just about him living large. He used this money for influence, sometimes pretty destructively.
Oh, absolutely. Libya in the 70s and 80s, it had a reputation. Gaddafi funneled millions to various groups he supported.
Like who?
Sources mention groups like the INLA in Ireland, the PLO, the IRA. Significant financial backing.
And using those same hidden channels.
Yeah.
Banks,
Yeah.
shell companies.
Yes, that whole network. It wasn't just random payments. It was a systematic way to bypass sanctions, support allies, and frankly, cause trouble on the international stage. It shows how easily that kind of hidden wealth can fuel conflict.
It really does. And Libya got implicated in some major attacks, right? Like the Pan Am bombing over Lockerbie.
Yes, Lockerbie was a huge one. Led to major international sanctions, though. As we've seen, his financial networks were pretty resilient.
So beyond funding armed groups, what about more traditional influence peddling, using money to sway politics?
Oh, definitely. Bribery was reportedly a major part of his foreign policy toolkit.
Really?
Yeah, sources talk about these extensive networks set up specifically to offer bribes. Foreign politicians, business leaders, government officials. The goal was pretty clear.
What? Get good trade deals.
That influence elections in other countries, get favorable votes at the UN, basically buying influence wherever he could.
It sounds incredibly calculated. A very strategic use of that hidden money.
It seems so. And it might tie into his bigger ambitions. Remember that speech he gave at the UN in 2009?
Vaguely. Wasn't it incredibly long?
Infamously long, yes. But he also proposed this idea of a new gold-backed African currency. The gold dinar.
A gold-backed currency for Africa.
Pretty radical. And some people theorize, well, that his massive hidden gold stash, that 143 tons we talked about, maybe that was intended to be the backing for this new currency.
Seriously, to challenge the dollar, the euro.
Potentially. A currency outside the control of the West, backed by his own gold. If true, you can imagine that might have worried certain global powers quite a bit. It adds another layer to why some might have wanted him gone.
Okay, so let's jump to 2011. NATO intervenes, the regime falls apart. What happens to all this wealth? Does it just evaporate?
Not all of it. Western governments did manage to freeze and seize billions in known Libyan assets, especially through the LIA. The U.S. grabbed a big chunk.
But
a huge amount just vanished, especially the physical assets, like a lot of that gold.
vanished how? Stolen. Hidden better.
All sorts of theories, smuggled out across Libya's borders in the chaos, hidden away in secret bunkers, maybe still undiscovered. Some even say buried out in the desert somewhere.
Buried gold. Sounds like something out of a movie.
Doesn't it? But the reality was Libya descended into civil war and chaos after Gaddafi. Trying to conduct a systematic search for hidden assets in that environment. Almost impossible.
So we're talking billions, maybe tens of billions, and tons of gold. Just lost, unaccounted for.
The estimates are all over the place, but yeah. Some reports suggest over $30 billion in Libyan funds are still missing, and the gold. Who knows? Scattered across the globe in private hands, still hidden in Libya, it's one of the big remaining mysteries.
It's just mind-boggling. This enormous, hidden financial empire built on oil, used for himself, used to bribe and fund conflicts.
It really is. The Gaddafi story is, I think, a stark example of how someone with absolute power can build and hide just extraordinary wealth, operating completely outside the normal rules.
So for you listening, when you think about this scale, this global reach,
Mm.
it really makes you question how possible it is for individuals to operate outside financial systems. And what does that mean for stability, for getting Libya's assets back?
What are the long-term consequences? It's a story that definitely invites you to look harder at sovereign wealth, sure, but also international finance, how power works, and the messy legacies these kinds of regimes leave behind. There's still so much